And we're live on another broadcast, Cloudburst, with my dad here, David McNeil. My name is Judah, and we are going to talk about fasting today. I thought it would be a good idea since today is Lent. Yesterday was Ash Wednesday began Lent, and you guys, well,
we fasted yesterday.
Fasted, and I started my fast, and so, I mean, it's just, it's an interesting thing, though, fasting is, there's the dynamic in the Bible that talks about not talking about fasting, don't talk about it.
And we're actually kind of breaking the rules by talking about fasting now, but that's okay. That's for our instruction and your instruction too. And
I think mainly it's like, don't brag about it, right? And
well, I certainly can't brag about it because I think yesterday we had a brief fast.
Yeah.
And not very an intense fast, and I can't remember when the last time before that was. And that's why we got around to it. I thought, man, we are leaving something far behind here that's not, that's not right. But go ahead, you were going to say.
Well, I just think that fasting is important. I just want to start off by kind of giving my thoughts on fasting and why I think it's important. I believe it comes down to something that we talked about before, and that was that if we don't fast, what happens is we get self-indulgent. And the moment I sit down with a beer in front of the tube, that is when somebody in need comes by, It's not like some wonderful friend. It's usually somebody that, this guy is asking for money or
time.
Or time, or it's I gotta get I gotta get the trailer ready, something where I have to and I think fasting helps us stay on our toes, stay nimble.
That's right. That's good.
And I mean, the main purpose, as it's stated in the Bible, is to humble us before God and help us be in touch with more than just comfort. To be uncomfortable is to be more aware.
There we go.
And particularly of the supernatural. I think the more we're in our flesh, the less we're in tune with anything outside of our flesh. And that's mainly what I had.
That's good. And I think now we're talking about fasting, that is, not eating during a certain time that you proclaim. You say, okay, you decide, you confess, I'm not going to eat from this period to this other period. Otherwise, you say, I'm just not going to eat for a while. Well, then you'll give in. But you don't eat. Now, the common reference to that, to fasting, is what Jesus said toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, where he says, when you fast, which implies that you're going to fast. Right? Who thinks that Jesus didn't fast? Who thinks that he says that his disciples didn't fast because, in fact, they were criticized for not fasting because the bridegroom was with them. They were celebrating. The Messiah was there. It was not a time to fast because God was with them. See, but when he says, when the bridegroom goes away, that will be a time to fast. The fasting is to sharpen our sensitivities as one to our poor lack of discipline and how much we love to eat and satisfy ourselves. And then to sharpen it, to open our ears as to what God wants to tell us. Because fasting is not to work on God. It's not to show God how wonderful we are and so that he will hear our prayers. It's to sharpen ourselves so we'll know what to pray for. So we'll pray according to his will. And we will, as we have often talked about on this program, we will learn participation. We want to participate. He wants to participate with us, and we participate with him. We want to be in his will. Well, we can't be in his will if we're always just satisfying our most recent desire and our most common desire. Our most common desire is to eat. And the most common pleasure among all men around the world, men and women, is to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, when you think about it, it's kind of sad. I mean, the what do people live for? You think, what do they amass money for? Well, to get warm, nice places to go to sit down in, so they can eat real good food and drink the best. Otherwise, what else can they do?
Well, the flip side of fasting is the Eucharist. It's, when the Reverend Fitch once pointed out to me that the reason the Eucharist is important is because it brings the supernatural into something that's so ordinary. And very, as you
the Lord's Supper he's talking about.
The Lord's Supper, yeah.
Okay.
So eating is, like you said, it is the most ubiquitous. It is the most widespread, universal thing that we do together.
Yeah,
and
together.
Yeah, and together.
We've talked about that before.
We actually do other things more often, but alone usually. And but eating, is something that we share. It's a pleasurable, it's a wonderful thing that we do together. And
but now I'm not getting the point.
So the Eucharist brings the supernatural, brings Christ into the thing that
eating.
We do the most together.
Right.
So it's a social. It's so sanctifying it by practicing the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper, sanctifies it in a way that brings it into. It brings the Lord into our everyday, ordinary tasks.
Yes.
Pleasures.
Okay. Yeah, and he says, eat of my body, drink of my blood. And if you don't, you won't live. If you do, you'll live. And so fasting.
But fasting is sort of the flip side of that. It's like.
Yeah, fasting is afflicting ourselves. Now, in the Bible, it talks not eating for a certain period of time. In the Old Testament, it uses the words humbling myself and afflicting ourselves, And so in the King James, it talks about afflicting yourselves, so that on I think it's on the Day of Atonement, sometime in September, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, they afflict themselves and they fast because it's a solemn day. It's a solemn day, and it's a time to recognize your weakness, recognize your need, recognize your sin, and come before God, recognize your need of God. And it's a thing that we should be doing regularly when you fast. And I think the modern church does not fast that, to my understanding. And there may be churches that do this regularly. I mean, I've been in all kinds of churches, and fasting was not a regular thing that was taught. Right. It was kind of an extra thing, like a super spiritual making thing? Like making a pilgrimage, and like so some people fasted. I go, oh, good for them, people fasted. I can't think of anything that's kind of like that, but at the end of Matthew it says, when you fast, do this, and don't go, don't live. I've seen. I remember a couple when I was out in California one time. There was a couple of hippies that were living in this commune where I was, and they were fasting, and they looked like they were dying, and they went off, by themselves, and I saw them, and I thought, that's what Jesus said, don't do that. Put oil on your hair, comb your hair, don't look like you're suffering, and don't let other people know. And in the same way, it says, when you give alms, when you give your money in charity, don't say it to everybody, look at this, or look at all this money I'm giving, Right. You don't even let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You just give it and we move on. What's the third one there? When you pray, don't go in the corner and go, oh, Lord, and these long, great, elaborate prayers. You don't let other people know. You go into your closet, somewhere secret, just between you and God. So it's something that you do on your own between you and God. And so it is as one of those three, what would we call them? Activities, what would we call them? Disciplines. Disciplines, fasting, praying, giving alms, and praying, right? That we don't let other people know that we're doing. Now, we're letting you know that we're entering into this, but we're doing it, and I'm doing it in a kind of a confessional way that I haven't done it for years.
Mhm.
And here I am. I did it before. I've done it before. But I had a friend, my Indian friend, Tim Anaya. He used to fast, and he used to fast before they had these Indian things, and it was not
Like it's a ceremonial thing?
Yeah, ceremonial thing. And he would fast. And he understood when I would fast for Christian things, I think it was a believer, but the Indian ceremonial thing was heavy in his life, and I think he was somewhat troubled about it. Not troubled, but conflicted. But he did fast, and he would see me fasting, and then I don't know, having a coffee or something like that while I was fasting. Hey, you should be doing that. So he taught me a lot about fasting, and but these disciplines are things that we as Christians should be looking at. We all should be giving our money on a regular basis, not necessarily. I say regular, not necessarily every Sunday morning you give 10%. That's for you and God to decide. But it should be a part of our regular activity. Just like I got to go down and spend now I've got money. I want to go down and go shopping. Well, now I've got my check. I got to make some money and take some money and give it to the church or give it to this poor person. However you decide to tithe. We could talk about that some other time. But fasting, giving of your money, and praying regularly, going to God, not just before you eat, but going to God. That's another thing. And so let's dedicate. I've dedicated myself. Man, I've got to pray more on a regular basis. Not just, turns out sometimes my wife and I, when I will pray before we eat, we get into long prayers. Why? Because we haven't been praying, So there we find ourselves before the Lord, and these other things, praying for you, praying for our children, praying for other people that are on our mind, come out. We need to pray often. We need to give our money, and we need to fast, and that will bring us into an idea of what the Lord is doing. What's He doing, and what are we like? What kind of people are we like?
Yeah, well, and the answer to that really does have to do with what do we do, right? As people, our actions, what we do on a regular basis is what really defines us, right? And so I think that's why I've really gotten into these. I love seasons, and I love the churches that celebrate seasons or bring intentionally do things differently in different seasons. So Lent, doing something different for Lent and pointing out different seasons, because without calendar, without certain things that we practice regularly, I think it ends up our habits are formed by our desires.
Other things, by our desires. That's good. I interrupted you. Yes, if we don't have calendars, what did he just say? That's good. If we don't have calendars, our habits tend to be formed by our desires, and by the world's impinging on us, right?
Yeah.
And so the calendars, I am not a big fan of the world's calendars, what you call the Hallmark calendar. So yesterday we had you got to love your wife on Valentine's Day. Rest of the year, the heck with it, No, and Granddad's Day, and I don't know all the days and so on. Yeah. Well, Easter. I'm big on Easter. We used to, Lori and I used to practice celebrating Good Friday. That was our one big religious holiday that we practiced, and we did fast on Good Friday, and that was something because we lived in New Mexico at the time, and then we moved to Quebec, which was also Catholic, and so we were in a context of fasting on Good Friday, and so we fasted on Good Friday, and so fasting on Good Friday was a good deal. That's when I did fast the most. But I tell you what, I just reveal one thing that came up when you don't fast often and you don't fast with the right
motives.
Fast to find God. you can get pretty irritable when you fast. I used to get irritable.
Mm.
You know, I remember we used to live near, what's the fellow's name that we lived near? Had the generator. Would go on Gilmet, you know. So we lived way out in the country, so quiet, so beautiful, except when our neighbor would turn on his generator, which had no
muffling
or anything, just you know, it was yeah, oh Lord. And I remember going over to his house for something. I had some other thing to talk to him about, and on the day I was fasting, and I got a little sharp about his generator. And I can remember him saying, "Yeah, I know how you feel up here in the quiet. Just talk to me up here in the quiet north in the woods, you know, and you have to put up with somebody's generator, you know. Well, it's something that I need for what I'm doing in my life, you know." But instead of being kind to him, I just felt very sharp. So you have to watch when you're fasting that you don't get irritated.
Yeah.
Get irritated at yourself. That's what you're supposed to be finding out, is what kind of a person, what kind of a weak person you are. Humbling yourself, it says, afflicting yourself. You know that verse that says, if my people humble themselves, you know, and turn to me, you know, and in 2 Chronicles, if my people humble, then he means fasting.
Yeah.
That, at least that's the teaching that I have gotten, you know, fasting.
So when it mentions humbling yourself, a big aspect of that was fasting.
Well, think about, certainly humbling is more than fasting, but a good way to humble yourself is to fast.
Right. Instead of just having a sort of mental assertion of humbleness, I'm not a good guy. Actually do something about it. Yeah.
It humbles you. Fasting. So you say, oh, look at me. What am I thinking about right now? I want to eat. Not that I want to get down on my knees and talk to God. I want to eat. You know?
Well, that was something that was brought up often in this sense. When I was working in mental health, we would get in these groups and we talk a lot. One thing that came up a lot in these groups of men was self-care. And a lot of what I would hear from myself and others in these circles was more like self-indulgence. Like, oh, I'm going to, you know, for self-care, I'm going to, you know, get a bottle of this, or, you know, watch that or binge that. Typically,
really caring about yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what did you think? What was it? Did you think under? What was it supposed to be? What?
Well, self-care is particularly for not burning out. You know, it's to make sure it's really about setting limitations for you, and that's really what fasting is, right? It's a stricter and more intentional limitation. And I feel like self-care, if it was taught right, would include prayer, fasting, and maybe some kind of participation of, you know, spending, or, you know, I don't know how tithing would come into self-care.
Or charity. I mean, giving money.
Yeah, actually. Maybe giving of your time or money in helping others.
Well, there you go.
Helping others.
Yeah. Opening yourself, as you said, you know, what is the time when we know that we are called upon to be the servants of Christ? What is the time? When we are comfortable, when we are ready to indulge ourselves as we richly deserve, and Doodah shows up, or, you know, so-and-so shows up, whom I don't want to see, whom I don't want to serve, whom I don't want to love. And God says, love this person, love this man, you know. And boy, the sacrifice is called for then, you know, the love, you know. We had a teaching on love this morning, and I was really challenged by, because, you know, the chapter on love in 1 Corinthians 13. You know? Well, the interesting thing about that is that the first verse of the following chapters, in the King James, it says, "Follow after charity, pursue love." Well, how do you do that? You know, how do you pursue love? Well, I have to say, one thing is you act as though you did love this person. You have to act as though you love this person. You have to make yourself available for God to put that feeling of love in you. You can't just gin up love for somebody.
Right.
You have to act as though you love. So the person shows up, you have to go, "Oh, hi, Willie. Ah, good to see you." You know.
Yeah.
And that's fasting too. We lay down.
Right.
We lay down that thing that we wanted to have and we thought that was ours, like eating. We say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to give that time to this other person. But that's what fasting is practicing to do that.
Yeah.
Practicing.
I would say it's practicing not being the king.
That's right.
You know, like I feel like it's so much in my life. I put myself up as the king and I eat what I want.
Right.
And I do what I want. Because I feel like, and especially as an American, I feel like I'm the king, you know, my family's the king. You know.
Right.
But fasting is a very particular and intentional way of humbling yourself, humbling myself to, I'm not the king. I can't just eat what I want.
Right. That's right.
I don't just do whatever I want, and I don't just satisfy every need. I'm not ruled by desires. A king is only ruled by his desires, right?
And really, it's one amazing thing about fasting is it liberates so much time.
Yeah,
you know, suddenly it's lunchtime and you go, oh, what do I do? Well, you know, first of all, you think, well, it's a time for prayer. No, you get down, pray, listen to God. What is God talking to you about? Because now you're ready. You realize you're ready. You need God to talk to you, you know. And it may be a time when, well, maybe you need to call up so-and-so, or maybe you need to serve somebody. You've got more time. Yeah, I'm saying this like I do this all the time. But I'm suggesting for myself that I do this, you know.
Well,
but at least prayer. But serving other people, we do have more time when we're fasting. And fasting, in a larger sense, when we give up the things that we want to do, my TV show, my time that I read, or you know, whatever, I want to go fishing, whatever, you know, we have time for other people.
Yeah. And the more we practice it, the more we're oriented away from ourselves. And
away from ourselves. That's what you were saying. We're not king, you know, we are a servant. And that's what we want to end up being, is obedient to God, his servants. And Lord knows we are far from that in our natural self. Secretly way down there when nobody is watching, when nobody's looking except the Lord God, we know we are the boss. We want what we want. And we have every right to it because we're a good person. But that's not true, is it? No, that's not true. We are who we are. And we have this life, this day, because it's a gift from God. You know, when I go to Bible study, went to this morning, you get there about 6:30 in the morning. I had to get up early, you know. And sometimes they ask me to pray. And the first thing I pray for, it comes from the Lord, is thank you that we are alive today. Thank you that we have this, that we're well enough. I mean, I complain about having to get up early in the morning and get dressed, everything, get in a cold car and drive out there. But, you know, man, I'm alive. And at my age, at 70, almost 77, I'm happy to have the energy to get up and go and be there. So it's you know, our life is a gift. And fasting, I think, should show us, hey, wait a second, wait. This is a gift from God.
A tenuous gift.
That's right. It could go, like we know, like Tata went in a moment, and before we knew it, he was gone. And so we ourselves, we never know. I think it's hard to live like that, always thinking, well, the next moment we could be gone. But still, every now and then we should remind ourselves, this is the day that the Lord has made for us. It's a gift. And freely as you have received, freely give. So, and God help us to hear from God, that we don't just proclaim a fast because we're some kind of a proud Christian, but we're trying to be obedient, you know, and find a way to get closer to his heart, so we'll know what he wants from us and what he's doing with us, what gift he's giving to us. You know, maybe we're going to miss something if we don't listen.
yeah, and what do we get from being king of our own lives? Not
Well, I
much.
know what I've gotten. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, let's see. Thank you. Oh, Anna is watching, cousin Anna, and she's one of our faithful
Yeah, thank you, Anna.
tuning in, and we had other people watching. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, have a blessed day.
Yeah, everybody have a blessed day, and skip that meal, if the Lord wants you to, pray. Yeah, but thank you for joining us. We enjoy doing this for you, and we'd love to hear from you. Oh, well, thank you for the thumbs up. Right in my eye.